Hello everyone, as I've communicated with you guys a few weeks before, I'm working on a project in one of my sociology classes, and if you guys don't know, I do major in sociology in the University of British Columbia, and for those of you who don't know what sociology is, it's basically the study of society, how people interact with each other, how we interact with the society around us, the world around us, which is quite fascinating. That's why I am studying this subject. So one thing that we've learned in class that really intrigued me and I thought would be pretty fascinating when talking about it, and also what we do here on the channel, which is Jurassic World Alive, which is an AR game, which is based on geolocation, and I thought when thinking about AR, augmented reality, and geolocation-based games, they are, in a sense, they're using the land, they're using geography, they're using spaces, and creating virtual spaces, which really redefines land, just like how, for example, the Canadian government identifies land. For example, I am on the UBC campus, which is the university lands, as the Canadian government sees it, and as the Musqueam people see it, which are the people who were here before the Canadian government was established here for all the colonialization happened back in the day when they were establishing their regime and state here. We are on what was and still is, to an extent, Musqueam land. And to the Musqueam people, this is the land that they've lived on, they've identified with. This is the land that they, survive on, they hunt on, they communicate with others on, they have cultural practices, spiritual practices, and a lot of what they do is tied into their identity and their identity with that land, and which is also redefined in many dimensions. One specifically is how the Canadian government sees this land. They see it as, the lands of the university. The university sees it as their land, and, not exclusively Musqueams or the Canadian governments. And when I was playing Jurassic World Live, and I would just boot up the app for 1 second and show you guys what I mean about how it relates to the game and many other games like Pokemon Go as well. So, this part of the land, which is I am on university lands, this land means a lot of different things to very different people. So, as I mentioned, what it means to the Canadian government, what it means to the university, what it means to the Musqueam people, and other Indigenous groups who may have lived or resided on this land, and to players like us who do play such games. It is a place to hunt dinosaurs. For example, this specific part of this land, we can have apatosauruses, we can have euoplocephaloses and Dracorex Gen 2s, if I could see any. There are some Dracorex Gen 2s, and very occasionally T-Rexes, etc. And this is it's almost like the AR has the augmented reality, by augmenting reality, has redefined this land on a virtual dimension. It's another way of, re-identifying this land on their own terms, on the terms of this digital virtual space, which they take in, which is also different from what the Canadian government sees it, how the Musqueam people sees it, how the university sees it, how the community around us sees it, which is also all very distinct and different. So maybe moving on to the main topic, I just wanted to talk a bit about that. I found it quite fascinating, and how it does relate some way into, what we do on this channel, and how, colonialism affects lands on so many different levels, and now with technology, there's a new dimension, if you must, of colonialism. So let's talk about the Olympics. And, as we do in this game, it's an outdoorsy AR game. We go outdoors and, try to find dinosaurs to catch and battle with. And unfortunately, I was hoping to go to the on-site, since I do live in Vancouver, as you guys all know. We are in the rainy season of Vancouver at the moment, unfortunately, so I can't really go out there. But we could still talk about some incidents or some systemic problems that we've had with the Olympics in regards to the Indigenous people, and how they are portrayed by the Canadian government, the Olympic Committee, and others involved on the world stage. So for those of you who don't know, yes, Canada has hosted Olympics before, 3 times in fact. Once a Summer Olympic and 2 times a Winter Olympic, and we are admittedly pretty good in many Winter Olympic sports. So the first one we've ever hosted was in 1976 in Montreal, Quebec. That was the Summer Olympics, and the other 2 Winter Olympics were in 1988, Calgary, Alberta, and 2010 in Vancouver, BC, which was quite sort of recent. And if you've lived in Vancouver during that period of time, you would know what it was like. So the article I'm referencing is the article from Jennifer Adese, which is titled Colluding with the Enemy, Nationalism and Depictions of Aboriginality in Canadian Olympic Moments. So in all 3 Olympic moments, the author gave it a sort of a characterization. And for the first one, which is the Montreal, the characterization was Indians. And for those of you who don't know what happened in Montreal, is during the, I believe, closing ceremony, the Olympic organizing committee had non-Indigenous choreographers choreographed the Indigenous dances, which it sounds unbelievable at first, but that's actually what they did. They had non-Indigenous people teach Indigenous people how to dance Indigenous dance, which wasn't really Indigenous dance. And they also, they hired, French Canadian dancers dressed up and all painted in accordance to all the, the stereotypes that they see these as American Indians, and, had all the, stereotypical clothings, and not the actual clothing that the Indigenous people do wear and identify with. And it really was kind of a disaster. So that was a really a dark moment in the Olympics closing ceremony. The Indigenous people were unfairly portrayed as a European stereotype of American Indians, which did not represent them, and they were, trying to have this multiculturalism, sort of view on the Indigenous people, and how they are, they integrated into Montreal society, and it was a total debacle. So unfortunately for Montreal, it didn't work out that well. And let's see how Calgary did on this issue as we talk about the Olympics in Calgary and how the Indigenous people were portrayed there. So moving on to the Calgary Olympics of 1988, which were the Winter Olympics, it was arguably more disastrous than the Montreal one, which was already a total debacle. And what they did in the opening ceremony was they went with a theme, and they propped up 3 figures, which were the Mounties, the cowboy and the native or the Indian, in their case. And what they tried to do was, for you guys who don't know, the Calgary Stampede is a very it's an it's an iconic event that the city has, which is problematic for many reasons, but it's basically kind of like a rodeo. They want to portray their Western Canada culture and that, and whatever. So and they were trying to have that it being integrated with the Olympic ceremonies, and also have the natives and Mounties in. And what they did with the Indians here, which was unfair to say the least. So it is problematic. So let's talk about the Mounties first. It is very problematic to have the Mounties and the Indigenous people portrayed in a same fashion, because for those of you who don't know, the Mounties had some really problematic history. They basically carried out the genocide against the Indigenous people. I know that a lot of people, when they think of Canada, they think of the Mounties as a symbol, which really didn't do much good in the past. They were part of a colonial force that committed atrocities against people. The Mounties played a huge role in enforcing the residential school system, which destroyed so many lives of the Indigenous people, and they went with the policy, and unfortunately they were implicit in what they were trying to do, which was, as they call, take the Indian out of the child, and just completely change their identity, and they could, as they want, assimilate into Canadian society, whatever that meant to them, which obviously isn't what it meant to the Indigenous people. So having them on the same stage with the same stature is very problematic. And for the Mounties, there are some people who don't know the history and would kind of get, it's understandable if some people really can't see the connection there, but the cowboy and Indian portrayal, that was very over the top. It was covertly just showing, the light skin versus the dark skin, and they have all those racial stereotypes with it, portraying the cowboy side as the good, and with all those stereotypes on the Indians, portraying them as the more evil side, which it doesn't get more obvious than that, what they were trying to do, and miserably failing to do so in trying to portray Calgary as a welcome city with Western values or whatever they think they were trying to do there. It was so over the top that their initial idea for this for this whole scene was that they would have Indians, there was an Indian attack and they were burning wagons and stuff, and then the cowboys come in and fight back. And thankfully that idea was rejected. It was so horrible that they had to reject it. That was just so over the top disastrous. And although they rejected that, what they went with wasn't that great either. And even the prospect of them even going, thinking of coming up with an idea like that, just shows how much colonialism is deeply rooted in some of these people's minds, and how these stereotypes really affect how people perceive the Indigenous people in here, which, and I know I've said this a lot of times already, it's really problematic. And finally we get to Vancouver, the Winter Olympics, Vancouver 2010, where they tried to get it right. They saw all the failures of the past two Olympics, and they were trying to put it right, but unfortunately they had problems as well, which is unfortunately now it's almost kind of expected, which is very it's really sad just how it, all these failures that the Olympic Committee in Canada has really created. So first of all, just a side part of the event, that there was this whole Indigenous youth performance that they were going to do, and they got totally ambushed and sidelined, and they didn't get the information right, and a lot of people got rejected for no really clear reason, and that whole performance got just totally messed up. And then the big entrance of the four host First Nations, which by the way were the Tsleil-Waututh, the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Lil'wat Nation. They had an entrance, and they had this whole thing with poles rising from the ground, and them welcoming people around the world to their land, which at the time is Vancouver, and they use their language, they use their greetings, and it seemed like it was an appropriate move, but there was also problems with that. So what they tried to do here was have this whole multiculturalism theme run through their whole Indigenous performance, and on the surface it seems like, oh, it's all good, kumbaya, the colonialists and the Indigenous people and the immigrants later, they're all happy working together. But that isn't the case, because remember, the colonialists came here and committed genocide against these people. They literally committed genocide against these people, and they want to portray them as like willing participants without resistance. Like, that's it seems beautiful on the surface, but when you really think about the issue and the history of colonialism, it really is kind of screwed up. So whether it was the Indians in Montreal, the natives in Calgary, or the Aboriginal people in Vancouver, what Canada has tried to do, either demonize them or pacify them, like what they did in Vancouver, to push their agenda in either whitewashing history or just really pitting people against each other and portraying that as a value that Canada has on a world stage as large as the Olympics. That really doesn't put Canada in a good light. It's really revisionist, and it's not fair. Not even to Canada itself. If we're not owning up to what happened and trying to find solutions to, of course, we can't really repair all the damage that's done, but there are some guidelines that are set up by the Truth and Reconciliation Committee that we could be following. We could work better with the Truth and Reconciliation Committee and really make these events or these disasters on the world stage, we could make, these are such good opportunities to show the world what has happened in this country and to make improvements in the country and to show the world that Canada can do better. But unfortunately, we have really botched these opportunities, and hopefully this could be a guideline for future events if we were ever to have the privilege of hosting any more world events, to make it right. And unfortunately, we haven't had in the past, and hopefully it does better. And I'm sorry for those who don't who watch my channel, not for this content, but for those who stayed this long and heard about what has happened in Canada regarding this issue. Hopefully you've learned something, and hopefully it changes your mind on how Canada portrays the Indigenous people. And really, really thank you for still supporting my channel. And don't worry, the regular content will be uploaded. I will have a Toronto Rex video a bit later today. And again, thank you for listening to my little video on this issue, and I'll see you guys in the next video.